Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me here and thanks for checking out my podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell for new episodes. You can also find Shine Without Shame on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Well, today my guest is Masud Olufani. Masud is an Atlanta-based actor, mixed media artist, and writer whose studio practice is rooted in the discipline of sculpture. He is a graduate of Morehouse College and the Savannah College of Art and Design, where he earned an MFA in sculpture in 2013. Masud has exhibited his work in group and solo shows nationally and internationally. He has completed residencies at the Vermont Studio Center, the Hambidge Center for Arts and Sciences, and Creative Currents in Portobello, Panama. He is a 2017 Southern Arts Prize State Fellow, a recipient of a 2015 and 2018 IDEA Capital Grant, a Southwest Airlines Art and Social Engagement Grant, and a recipient of 2015-2016 MoCA, is it MoCA, Georgia? Working
Mocha
Artist
GA. Yeah, Mocha,
MoCA
Georgia. Yeah, it's fine.
GA,
hmm
MoCA GA Artist Project Grant. Masud is the creative director of Blocked, a global healing project, a multimedia performance created to memorialize spaces marked by the trauma of the transatlantic slave trade. As an actor, he had a recurring role on the BET series The Quad and has appeared in numerous television shows including Greenleaf, Being Mary Jane, Devious Maids, Satisfaction, and Nashville. He is a featured actor in the film biopic All Eyes on Me. Formerly the co host of the PBS News based investigative journalism show Retro Report, which premiered nationally in the fall of 2019. Masud is the lead actor in No Cowards in Our Band, a film produced in collaboration with Syracuse Opera. The film tells the story of the great freedom fighter Frederick Douglass. It premieres on PBS affiliate WCNY in July of 2021. As a writer, Masud has published articles for Burnaway, Baha'i Teachings, and is a featured contributor for the Jacob Lawrence Struggle Series catalog, produced to coincide with a major exhibition of the Struggle Series paintings. In the fall of 2021, Masud will be the visiting artist fellow at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Masud, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm happy to be here, Tiffany. It's a joy.
Likewise, I'll share with my audience that you and I are meeting for the first time. It was a mutual friend who connected us, and I knew a little bit about you, but I am really looking forward to a rich conversation with you. I know that you have a dynamic mind, and as an artist, I know that that just means that everything you think about is through an interesting creative lens. So this will be interesting. Yes, again, my podcast is focused on the idea of shame and really, for the most part, getting shame out of our culture. Maybe just on a personal, individual level. I don't think that shame, for the most part, is useful. I mean, I've heard, I think it's Brene Brown, describe shame as the belief that we're a bad, like the belief that I'm a bad person. That would be one way of kind of an example of how shame manifests for an individual. And guilt is a little different. Guilt is maybe more about behavior. And I thought that was an interesting way of distinguishing those two. But for the most part, I don't think that shame is all that useful. I think yes, it can help us as a tool maybe to be reflective, especially in the case of a really serious set of circumstances, maybe a crime or something that's a big deal. But for the most part, on an individual kind of day to day, trying to progress in life, I don't think it's that useful. And I also think sometimes it can be kind of easy to get caught up in shame when you're actually living your great life, you're doing well, you're thriving, you're prospering, but people around you may not always, depending on who they are, they may not always be supportive of that. And then sometimes shame can kind of maybe be a bit of a barrier to our own progress. So those are some of the thoughts that I have around shame. And I thought that I would speak to you about this and get your reflections on how you look at shame. And I wonder, not that it has to be from a male, specifically just a male perspective, but
Yeah.
I know that sometimes I've heard men who are thoughtful and mindful about their lives, that there's a perception for some men that even like weakness as a man is something that they want to stay away from. They don't want to be perceived as weak, and that can kind of be a source of shame for some men. Mm, I don't know if we want to start there, but that was one idea that I had off the top.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I mean, first of all, for clarity and for just pure honesty and transparency, I am an intersection, a living intersection of inherent contradictions.
Okay.
On the one hand, I am brave. There are times that I'm afraid. I am also strong. There are times that I am weak. I am confident. Sometimes I'm insecure. Um, I can be noble. There are other times that I can be petty. So all of these things live and dwell within me. I hope and pray that through effort and some reflection and that I can that those parts within me that more closely reflect the nature and the reality of the living God or spirit, whatever you want to call that, dominate my being. But I'm saying all that to say that I certainly am a flawed human being, struggling to walk a path that is difficult and challenging, having to learn the art and grace of forgiving others and also myself, and to allow myself the bounty and the blessing of patience and a kind of enduring perseverance to get up and try again each day. So, yeah, I think any man or anybody really who tells you that they don't have moments where they feel weak is not being, that's a warning sign to me because that's shows a lack of self reflection and it's not very honest. And I think part of being a human being is being able to bear not only our own contradictions, but also the contradictions of others and say that those things do not negate their full humanity. In actuality, it is a seems to be one of the fundamental constructs of humanity, how we're made in some sense. That we can't get through this life with all of its tests and challenges without internalizing um, some of those challenges, those things that become contradictions within ourselves. Nobody's perfect. We're all struggling. We're all working, hopefully, to get better. And so that's the way I try to approach it. I try to do that with other people, and it's sometimes it's easier to do it with others and more difficult to do it with oneself. But if I'm going to provide others that grace, I also have to be the recipient of that grace myself. I have to learn how to accept that grace for myself nobly. So, in other words, it's a process.
Yes. Yes. I know that's always said, but there's because there's so much truth to it. I mean, it is a process, and all that goes into that is, for I guess every person looks a little differently. I'm curious in terms of your own personal process, what you're willing to share. What does that look like for you on a day-to-day basis in terms of honoring yourself, like you said, as a noble being, and also accepting the challenges and the issues that you face, and moving forward a little bit every day. What does that look like for you in terms of cultivating that process?
Well, unfortunately, we live in a very um, difficult environment in terms of self acceptance and other acceptance. Um, we seem to have been socialized in many ways in this country to be harshly critical of ourselves and also of others. Um, I'm a Baha'i. For those who, in terms of the kind of framework for this discussion, I need to refer to some of that since this is such an important part of my being and the way I move through the world. But there's this teaching of bringing thyself to account each day, right? Just this kind of like ongoing daily reflection on how I've chosen to live my life. Um, Being transparent with myself about the ways that I have perhaps fallen short in terms of living out my ideal sense of being, and also, congratulating myself, or being thankful for the ways that I have reflected, my ideal sense of being. For me, based on the framework of the Baha'i faith. So, I am a very, I think I'm a hard taskmaster in terms of my expectations for myself, right? Um, I juggle several things. I do them at a professional level, which means that I have to hold the requirements, the professional expectations of all of those things collectively and individually when they're expressed that way, and constantly try to meet those marks, which requires a great deal of there's a dimension of discipline there. There's a dimension of yeah, of just constantly bringing myself to account in terms of how well I'm actualizing what it is that I say that I do. So I think if one is, it seems to me, if one perhaps is more focused on one's own kind of internal growth and less preoccupied with the growth of others. What I mean by that is where others are falling short. If we make the conscious choice to exercise the muscle of encouragement when it comes to dealing with other people and also with ourselves, I think we find that life becomes our pace in life becomes much more defined by grace than by a kind of oppression that we give to the world externally, and then we also give it to ourselves internally. I often say that people who are highly critical of others, there is a problem internally with that individual in terms of recognizing the beauty of themselves, um, the the inherent nobility, how they were created, the transcendent, mystical, majestical um, singularity of their being. And so I think we have to exercise. Love is about, the Bible says that love is patient, love is kind, love keeps no records of wrongs. And I think that's not just an internal exercise, that's also an internal exercise as well. So I have to, on the one hand, bring myself to account, ask God for forgiveness, accept the fact that I am forgiven, and keep moving forward. Try to do better the next time. Let it go. Yeah.
Yes, that sounds there's like a rhythm and a poetry to what you just described. It's, there's something that's while maybe you do the same thing every day in terms of your process, maybe you didn't say it explicitly, but there is a kind of a dynamic element or just something that it can't be totally completely tangible. Like, in other words, you are maybe calling yourself to account and you're expressing what you've done well and maybe where you fell short. But there's also something else that sounds like that kind of moves you. It's something that's in the spirit that kind of moves you to say, you know what? There's something greater than me, and I'm that's guiding me and that's protecting me, and I've got to trust that. And that's also, I know you didn't say that explicitly, but that I picked up on that was a part of the process as well.
Yeah, our imperfections are really a gift. We have a tendency to look at them as something that is shameful.
Hmm.
Um, but in actuality, our imperfections are key to humility. You
Yeah.
cannot, if we were all perfect beings, there would be no reason for humility. But the fact that we fall short all the time in different ways, there's a recognition that as hard as I try, um, perfection will always be somewhat outside of my reach. And that's the nature of human existence, for all of human existence. So there is nobody who's perfect. There are people who get closer to the mark than others, right?
Mhm.
But ultimately, there's always refinement. There's always things we can do. There's always ways that we, I could have done that a little bit better. But that's not anything to be ashamed of. That's the reality of our creation. So if God made us that way, it seems to me that we should be accepting of that, and in ourselves and also in others.
Right, and that what you're saying makes me think of the others in that formula. I mean, I think that oftentimes, I mean, I have limited experience and knowledge, but I have a background in psychology, and I've learned that oftentimes, and you probably understand this as well, it starts in our environment when we're young, in terms of
Yeah.
how we deal with
Hmm.
our challenges in life.
Hmm.
So some of us have, parents or guardians that don't hold a mirror up to us that is about shame. It's more about learning and moving forward. But I think some people do, unfortunately, start off in environments where shame is a big part of
Yeah.
the culture, the family
Yeah.
culture, or the environment that
Hmm.
they're raised in. Or maybe someone, even if they're not being shamed, maybe they at a young age they do things that they do feel shameful about, but there's kind of no one to nurture that and kind of massage that through, and so they may get stuck into a place of shame. And not that I'm asking you to go back to your childhood, but I'm just wondering what it's been like for you over your lifetime uh, to be around maybe people in your life who were more nurturing. Maybe it seems like that's what I'm gathering. You came from an environment that was more nurturing than maybe someone else might have, and so that shame wasn't necessarily a part of your family dynamic, or your family, or your formula of dealing with things. I'll let you put words in your own words in.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I think I was fortunate in some ways. I had a mother who nurtured my creative, curiosity and provided me with opportunities to explore that and to develop it. She was very intentional that way. So that was when she saw that in me. That was a very early recognition of the value of the fullness of my being. Right? She didn't try to repress it. She didn't shame me for it. So you'll never be able to make it doing that. You need to do something else. There was an embrace of the uniqueness of my being in that way that I'm very grateful for. On the other hand, my mother suffered from mental illness and trauma, um, which is not uncommon for African American people as a result of the history of our walk here in America. A lot of these things having roots that extend to the slavery era. And we think about all these people at the end of the Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation being issued on January 1st, 1863. Juneteenth, of course, coming sometimes after in Galveston, Texas. But all of these individuals entered the American, the free, and I use quotes there, American landscape without triage or counseling or therapy. So, whatever wounds they suffered under the brutal legacy of slavery, they carried those with them. So, my mother, certainly, I see the imprint of that in some of her complexities, you know,
Mhm.
um, in actuality, on both sides of my family. Um, but in terms of in terms of my artistry and making me feel special for being a creative person, that was always consistent. That was always there. How much of that is commingled with my mother's own unrealized dreams of being a writer? She was in love with the African American writer Frank Yerby, who was a black man who moved to Europe to escape racism in the 1950s. And she wanted to travel like Yerby. She wanted to live outside of a suitcase like Yerby and write. And, she never got that opportunity, as so many women, in particular, so many black women did not during that time. Um, so I was fortunate in that perhaps this kind of within the span of my being, this intersectionality of my own natural inclination towards the arts could meet her own unmet dreams of being an artist herself. So, in a way, pouring into me a kind of appreciation and respect for that, she was also realizing some aspect of herself that hadn't been fully developed. I mean, I think, unfortunately, so many people um, have a very difficult time in childhood, and I had my own challenges and difficulties. Um, and it causes them to question, those experiences can cause them to question their own self worth, their own value. I think that's true across the spectrum of humanity, right? But I will say, in terms of the African American community, I think all of those universal experiences are complicated by the social inconvenience of race. So not only do you have the things you're dealing with within your own family, but you also have the apparatus of the state, which historically has conspired to undermine your sense of self worth and self value. And we have to find ways, creative ways to rally against that. Ideally, hopefully, we are surrounded by people who recognize our value and lift us up in the face of that oppression, who are able to see something in ourselves that we cannot yet see within ourselves. And we hold on to that until we gain enough maturity and internal belief to stand on our own 2 feet and say, I got this, I'm good now. You know. So um, that's why I think I lean heavily into encouragement. I run from critical spaces. I'm not interested in them. I don't feel uplifted by them. I feel I feel critical spaces are the death of is the death of human potential. Well, I feel that encouraging spaces give life. They release human potential. And I'm not talking about sentimentality or saying something to people that is insincere. I'm talking about exercising the muscle of encouragement,
Right.
looking for those areas that we can lift up. You know, um, those reflections of the spirit, of the uniqueness of that individual, and encouraging, planting courage within the spirit, the soul, the individual, so that they can find their voice, their purpose, their mission, their destiny. Yeah.
Yes, that is, as far as I can understand, and as far as I believe, that that is really the heart of it all and the truth of it all.
Yeah.
And when it comes to families, I think it's really about the understanding of evolution on a lot of levels, or sometimes evolution is scary for families because that change, even if it's positive, can uproot the seemingly power position that maybe a family has in a community, or you know, I don't know, kind of cultural a village, just groups of people sometimes don't want to let go of change, or don't want to change. They don't want to let go of power, or that what seems to be stability. So they, interestingly enough, they will create false narratives, and feed that to the next generation so that and it's amazing because on one hand, that's like such a creative, um, really incredible ability. It's just in my opinion, that's just not in it's not ideal because it's not really about evolution, right? It's about
Yeah,
holding on to. That can happen culturally, nationally, that can happen with just even within family cultures. It doesn't have to be like
absolutely.
an ethnic,
Yeah.
racial, if you want to call it culture.
Hmm.
Certainly, it happens in all, aspects of life, but I think that can be the tricky part of our own individual progress is that sometimes we don't even understand the forces that are operating maybe within our own lineage, that
Yeah.
can keep things moving forward. I mean, what
Hmm.
you shared was there was, there is an acknowledgement of the history and its effect, and that unfortunately it's about trauma. But at the same time, there is something of a strength or of hope or of something like in your mother who who did look at the beauty in life and saw that wow, well, there's a lot to live for, and she encouraged you. That's really beautiful. But I wonder how many people are, and again, it may not be something as traumatic or heavy as history of slavery, but even so, it can hold people as individuals, can hold them back from their progress. Maybe it's a belief in the family line that this is no, this is what we do, this is what we don't do, this is what women do, this is what men do, and just locking onto that. So that's the way I think about things too. Is wow, it can be very powerful. History can be very powerful. Um, Often though, in my understanding, history for the most part, while it can uh, create an incredible sense of purpose or hope or again like a longing to evolve. A lot of history is not so positive for all kinds of people, and it seems that like what you're talking about, the seeing each person as their own unique being and noble, is really well, one, it seems to be at the heart of what we're doing here on this planet, but also it's just easier. The energy to put into the encouragement, like you were talking about, it's just easier for everybody all around. I think. I think, gosh, the energy to put into being critical, being oppressive. Whew.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I would say at the heart of a lot of criticism is an exercise of power.
Mm,
You know,
right.
the writer Bell Hooks says that the thirst for power and love cannot coexist.
Huh. Wow.
So, and she, in this example, she's describing in terms of family systems, and in particular in terms of patriarchy, toxic patriarchy. So that men who are invested in patriarchy and maintaining a system of patriarchy, which you know, um, kind of reinforces this imbalance between the sexes, between men and women, where men have maintained a kind of ascendancy or priority, and women are primarily there to nurture the children, to take care of the home, but not actually to pursue their own, you know, natural talents and gifts and to explore that aspect of themselves. So there's a kind of there is a desire to consolidate power that exists in opposition to love. It's an inhibitor to love. Because if power is the goal, and I see power as being the purview of only a few, right? But I don't see it as being the endowment of all, then my love, the love that I would be able to give if I was able to see power as um, an inherent right of all humanity, right? Gets blocked. It can't flow, right? Because I'm ascribing it to just a few and not to everybody. So this thirst for power, this desire to consolidate power, and we look at that in the context of a family, but again, it can be in the context of a village, of a country, of it can be ethnic, it can be religious, whatever it is. Um, I thought that was really quite a profound way of distilling how relationships can become toxic because there is a desire to arrest and to consolidate and maintain that power amongst the few. Yeah.
Th- Thank you, because this has been on my mind.
Hmm.
And I've spoken to a couple of male friends
Hmm.
about this idea in the last year, especially. And
Hmm.
I thought, well, what is it
Hmm.
for men in particular about holding on to, I guess, not just power, but that control?
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, well, a friend was saying that this is how most men learn to kind of operate in their family and their
Hmm.
workplace. And I thought, oh, but I guess my question is, what happens when some of that control is released? Does your life fall apart? Do you lose all of your wealth?
Yeah.
My hypothesis is no, but I
Hmm.
guess if that's all you've known,
Hmm. Hmm.
then you don't know what could be the other on the other side of that. If you let
Yeah.
go of if that some of that control is let go of, but
Hmm.
I've been thinking about this idea recently, and like I said in the
Yeah.
last year, and it's really fascinating to me because I to your point of love, I've been also exploring the opposite of love. I used to always say, well, it's hate. And
Hmm.
now I'm learning, no, it's really fear. That really is behind
Hmm.
everything
Hmm.
that isn't about love.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's really fear. And that's
Yeah.
profound because that's got to be
Yeah.
the agenda of a lot of people on the
Hmm.
planet,
Hmm.
especially
Hmm.
men, but
Yeah.
not necessarily only.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think, well, we men have been socialized into this kind of, this really is kind of a white Western patriarchal context because indigenous communities, African communities, many of them are matriarchal in terms of their structure. The women have a place, not a, their space in the family is not, is invested with power in a sense. They're leaders. They are seen as, in many ways, the kind of the gel that holds the society together, right? But white Western patriarchy, unfortunately, has operated in this kind of has created this structure where a man's dreams are seen as more important than a woman's dreams. You know, a man's career is seen as the primary driver of the decision making that controls the movement, the the orientation of the family, if you will. And I think what is happening, we're in a moment now, which is quite interesting. We're in a moment where these old frameworks that no longer serve, us collectively as a human species, they're getting broken. And what is happening, you're finding people that are responding to some of the challenges with this kind of new creativity, where they're exploring things like, well, what would happen if a woman in a family has a job that she absolutely loves? And her and her husband decided the husband stays home early with the kids, takes care of the children maybe for the first few years of life, and then they switch up. I have friends that have done this. And that's only one example. But what does it look like to have a family structure, a relationship where the talents of the woman are equally as important as those of the man? And the actualization of those talents are seen as a goal of the family structure. And that's really about sharing power, right? So
Right.
that unlocks the love, that frees up the love to flow because the woman feels empowered, she feels seen, she feels appreciated, right? The man feels seen and appreciated in the increased amount of time that he spends with the children or nurturing and caring for his wife. That's not looked upon as being a weak thing, but as being, an actualization of manhood, an aspect of being a man, something that should be celebrated. And so everybody is kind of freed from these constructs that prevent us from being fuller versions of ourselves. And then the love just flows there. It just ebbs and flows back and forth, this oscillating energy between man and woman, between children and the parents. Because family, ultimately, it seems to me, my understanding really should be about creating a space that unlocks the potential of everybody there, right? That serves the needs of the whole, while at the same time helping to create space for the development and actualization of the gifts that each individual has also. So it's, it's a negotiation, but I think the more that we are less invested in the more that we free ourselves of the impossible work of holding power amongst the individual or the few while denying power to the masses or those who have historically been locked outside of power, the more we free up our society to become a better version of itself, a society that can leverage the spectrum of our gifts. And we'll see an advancement of civilization that we've never seen before in human history when we do that. Yeah.
Hmm. Lots of powerful ideas. I Speaking of gifts and
Hmm.
encouraging
Hmm.
each individual
Hmm.
human to cultivate their gifts and offer them
Yeah.
to humanity. What are your thoughts about this idea that, and I don't know how much this is in the culture, at least in the States here,
Hmm.
a cultural thing for the male culture, but I know for a number of women I've talked to and myself, there's this idea that, or this experience that when you're doing really well in life,
Hmm.
you're shining.
Hmm.
Not It's not ego,
Hmm.
it's just you using your gifts and your talents.
Yeah.
There can be this experience where people around you, maybe they're peers, maybe they're
Hmm.
family members, community members, they don't like it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is everybody, but
Mhm.
there can be this almost this like, oh, why do they
Mhm.
get that, why, like, oh, like
Mhm.
I don't know if it's competition so
Mhm.
much as just a comparison of
Mhm.
ourselves to others. And when one person shines, it seems like sometimes there's a belief, and I think it's a misbelief, I think it's a myth, that when one person shines, it takes shine away from others.
Mhm.
Whereas my belief is, no, if
Mhm.
everybody's doing their best
Mhm.
using their unique gifts and
Mhm.
skills, then we all can shine. It's not one or the other, and it's not that one takes away from the next
Yeah.
person. But we do have, I don't know if it's a scarcity
Yeah.
complex that we have this I feel like it's a part of, at least, again, I live in the States. I feel
Yeah.
like it's a part of the culture here, and I don't know,
Mhm.
again, how much men experience this, but what is that about, or what have you witnessed about this? Like, oh, you can't shine too much. Okay, yeah, you're doing all right, great, but don't outshine, because then people sometimes want to take you down a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's about ego, essentially, right?
Mm,
Which is the shadow self, right?
mhm.
It's not the deeper part of ourselves that um, that can and should be celebrating in the accomplishments of others as we celebrate our own accomplishments. I think social media has presented us with a kind of challenge in our contemporary moment because the social media is a space where people can have heavily curated versions of themselves. So the only things they post, if they're actively engaged in social media, is the exotic places that they've been to, the kind of car they're driving, the latest award that they won, all of these things. Of course, that flattens the narrative because nobody's life is perfect. And someone looking at social media, perhaps who has had some challenges and some difficulties, that can be a difficult space to be in because the impression that you get is that everybody's living their best life, but you're not. The reality is that we all have struggles and challenges, right? I myself, historically, quite frankly and honest, have not been. It has not been beneath me to be jealous. To at times, feel like, man, why didn't I get that? Or I should have gotten that. what I've learned over time is a discipline and a practice that helps me to overcome that. And it's something that I had to do intentionally. So I do this with people that I know who get something that I probably would have liked to have gotten. I call them and I tell them how happy I am for them and what a wonderful accomplishment this is. Or I write them a note on Facebook or an email or something like that to celebrate them. Does that mean that I'm free of jealousy or I'm not doing any comparisons? No, but what it does mean is that I am choosing to act in such a way, in spite of that, that recognizes that what is for that person is for that person, and what is for me is for me. And the repetition of that practice, of that process, weakens my allegiance to the jealousy and the envy and increases my desire to want to be encouraging and uplifting and acknowledging of the accomplishment of others. The other thing about that process, it can never be dependent on what the other person does or does not do. I can't be, I can't allow myself to fall into, well, if they don't do it, I'm not going to do it, right? Because the only soul that I have any ultimate control over is my own. I have to be the lead protagonist in my own emotional, mental, psychological, and spiritual growth and development. So I make a choice to enter the world that way, um, in spite of whatever feelings that I might be having, whatever challenges that I might be having internally in terms of someone's success. And what I found is the more that I do that, the more, and I don't want to say something here that's going to sound too mystical. But what I have found is that if I enter the world in that space, opportunities in my own life expand. So there seems to be some internal kind of spiritual relationship between acknowledging the abundance in someone else's life and attracting abundance in our own.
Hmm.
There's an interrelationship there. And part of it, I think I kind of grasp, but it's also operating in a space that I can't fully grasp it. But I just know that it is kind of like, you know, the reality and the existence of the living God. There's, you know, someone asked me to prove it. You can't put that in a jar in a lab and do a test like you would in a science project. I just know it just is, and that's an internal knowing. You know, the old uh, during the time of enslavement here in the states, the seers, the soothsayers, the mystics used to say there's a difference between knowing and knowing. You know,
Hmm.
so yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. Thank you for being open and honest about that. I think it's just another distraction for
Hmm.
all of us, when we do compare ourselves, yet we all do that.
Yeah,
It's so hard not to.
yeah.
Um, but I I think of it, not to be too simplistic, but I think of it in the idea of, no two snowflakes are alike. I mean, there's
Mhm.
no way,
Yeah.
even if someone got the same degrees that you got, Masood,
Hmm. Hmm.
has the same career path, there's no way that they're going to be able to manifest their life in the way you are, and vice versa. It's not
Yeah.
possible for
Yeah.
anyone, even if you have the same interests, same
Mhm.
background and education.
Mhm.
There's no way to emulate that, or to really manifest it in a way that would look exactly the same or be the exact same
Yeah.
contribution
Mhm.
as somebody else. And I think when I think about this for myself, or when I felt like, oh, next to somebody, I think, but one, do I even really want what they want?
Mhm, mhm,
And
mhm.
when I really think about it, I'm like, no, not necessarily. I mean, maybe
Yeah,
sometimes they are in an area of interest or field that I'm in.
yeah,
But a lot of times I'm like, no, I don't even know if I really want what they want. I'm just so maybe jealous or envious that they have
yeah,
accomplished something. And that's
yeah,
what it really comes down when I've been really honest with myself and I've been in
yeah.
those moments, I'm like, it's not that I want that same job or I want that same award or I want that
Mhm,
same press, about
mhm.
I just want to be acknowledged for my gifts and my contributions
Yeah,
in whatever way I offer them. That's really what I boil it down to the
yeah,
simple truth. That's what it is that
yeah,
and like what you were saying, it's really about I think you said earlier on it's in our conversation, it's really about focusing on um what I don't remember exactly how you put it, but what you basically what you have to offer, what you how
mm,
you want to improve your own life. I mean, the more you put that energy into yourself
yeah,
and not focus on others,
mhm,
it allows other things to grow and develop. But yeah,
mhm.
it's I think this concept though that no one can ever be exactly the same as you or make the
Exactly.
same contributions.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's just our society kind of makes
Mhm. It's a zero-sum
this
game, isn't it?
yep,
Mhm,
exactly.
mhm,
Exactly. And like
mhm.
I've got to be number 1. That's
Yeah,
the only way I can succeed is if I'm number 1.
yeah,
We both
exactly.
can't succeed.
Mhm,
There's only one number 1.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah. It's
mhm.
just I think well that's impossible
Yeah,
to live in the world and like be willing to wake up every
mhm.
day if that's how you're feeling about it. I don't know.
Yeah,
That's how I think about it, but I think the more people get better at turning inward, honing in on what they've got to offer.
yeah.
And it's not about, I think sometimes, like you said, it can be ego. When people get competitive or,
Mhm,
want to kind of tear someone down.
mhm,
I think that, yeah, there is this culture though of like, well, who do you think you are?
mhm. Yeah, absolutely,
We've got to
absolutely.
knock that off.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Again, all that energy you put into that kind of
mhm.
thinking,
Yeah,
why not just put it into yourself and do your best?
yeah.
And it's a win-win-win all around
Mhm. Yeah.
if we do that.
Yeah, I mean, I love that quote that, I think Marion Williamson it's attributed to Marion Williamson that, Nelson Mandela used to quote, where he says that, we think we do others, a service by playing small, you know, but it's actually by, being the fullness of ourselves that we give others the courage to do also, you know?
Mm,
So,
yes.
we have to be all of ourselves. We have to bring all of that beauty, that talent, that uniqueness into our daily lives and allow it to shine. But there's a difference between having clarity about where it comes from and doing it to show off or to
Mhm.
say, to make a spectacle of oneself. Um, there's that great line from, I'm going to get pop cultural here, but there's that great line from Braveheart where Mel Gibson says, God makes men what they are, no more, no less. So,
Right.
whatever it is that we are, we need to bring all of that we are, to our daily reality. Dr. King used to say that not everybody can give speeches or lead marches. He said some people have to be the street sweepers. He said, but if you sweep streets so well that the host of heaven may one day say, there indeed lived a great street sweeper. So bringing the fullness of ourselves into our daily lives, not as something that nourishes or feeds the ego, but it's a celebration of the creative hand of the Spirit that God sought to see. He saw fit to place this unique set of talents and abilities within this individual. And their job in life is to dance in that reality. Because to withhold it, right, is really not making our contribution to the forward advancement of humanity. So we got to say, hey, man, this is what I do. And I'm sharing it. I'm giving it to the world. This is my gift. Please don't ask me to play small about my gift. Doesn't come from me, it comes from God. And I just want to dance. I want him to see me dance. You know, I want him to see me sing. I want him to see me, make business deals that benefit the least amongst us. I want him to see me, design buildings with poetry and beauty that uplift the nobility of the human spirit. I want him to see me celebrating his gift. Right. So it's very different than, the two different kind of ways of engaging around our abilities and our capacities. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And
Hmm.
one fosters like an abundance,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
the other is, yeah, very limiting.
Yeah. 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 Hmm.
Wonderful. Well, did you have any other comments or notes or thoughts that you wanted to offer
No,
before we wrap up?
I think it's been a wonderful conversation. I think, this is this whole idea of shame and where does it reside? Where does it live? How do we, how do we sometimes fall into it and stay there? You know, as opposed to allowing it in its best sense to be an indicator for a course correction, which is what it's supposed to be about. Ultimately, I think in its purest sense, in its spiritual sense, and reminding ourselves that you know. It's okay to feel bad about something that I've done, but that doesn't mean that I am bad. That means that the behavior was bad. It's two very different things.
Yes. That is that is right.
Yeah.
Distinction.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Thank
And
you so. Mhm.
I'm still learning that myself. I'm constantly in a process of reminding myself of that, internalizing that truth, that reality. You know, sometimes I'll have a tendency to stay in shame if I feel like I've done something wrong. And then I have to remind myself that's not who you are. You made a mistake. If you hurt somebody, ask them for forgiveness. Ask God for forgiveness. Then get your butt up and try again the next day. That's it.
Yes.
Mhm.
That really is what it's about.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Thank you so much, Masood. Thank you for
No,
joining
I'm
me.
happy. It's been a
And
privilege.
I always ask my guests at the end
Yeah.
if you could recommend, or if you recommend a television show, new or old,
Hmm.
which one would it be and why?
Wow, what a great question. Television show, new or old? Let's see. Hmm. I like the show. I think it's an Oprah Winfrey show. It's called Sugar, I think is the name of it. And it's about a black family who inherits a sugar cane farm, and about them struggling to maintain their business in the face of racism in the Deep South. It's about seeing the three dimensionality of these people, their humanity, this family working together to try and accomplish something. Essentially, it's about human beings who happen to be representing themselves or presented in the skin of blackness, and the fullness of who they are is not is encased within blackness, but it operates beyond their blackness as well. And I think shows like that for me um, are really about getting in touch with some dimension of the human spirit that feels authentic and real, and that's a growth space. So any television work that does that, I'm all in for. So yeah,
Yes, I believe it's called Queen Sugar.
Queen Sugar.
Yes,
That's it.
yes, I'm familiar with it. I haven't finished it, but I actually bought it, so
Yeah,
I
it's a
I can go
great
back to it.
show.
It
Really good.
agreed.
Yeah, really good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much
You're
again.
welcome. You're welcome. It was my pleasure. It was an honor to be here with you.